over 1.2 million people watched a video that I recorded where I essentially said that women should not be asking men for money, specifically young women. And I talked about the dangers. I talked about the downsides of encouraging young women to request either directly or indirectly men to give them money in exchange for their company, for their time, in exchange really for their presence, and also, quite frankly, in exchange for their bodies. And I'm going to talk today about the three really important things that I think we need to be thinking about in a culture that continues to encourage this type of thinking. And I think a lot of the arguments put forth in support of women asking men for money are often conflated. Okay. And I don't think we think enough about the very real interpersonal and individual consequences this can have on women and young men in particular. And that's another big thing that we will talk about, because quite frankly, I think in an ever evolving modern society, it isn't just young women who are affected by this type of thinking, by this type of worldview. Okay. And of course, the original video was, I did receive a lot of DMs from very unhappy people. And so in this video today, we're going to significantly go into detail about what I really think about this and why I think it's so important that young women in particular, because there are women, they're lost, okay? There are women of yesteryears who grew up in very different circumstances, okay? And so, of course, attitudes around money, attitudes around men and money were very different, okay? But I really think we need to be focusing on the here and the now. So I am going to be talking about what financial dependency actually is at a systemic level, what it does to a woman on a psychological level when she lives inside it, and then the specific invisible contracts, okay, around women, money and men that many of us were handed. We've inherited these invisible contracts, but actually we are continuing to obey them on a nervous system level. And that isn't necessarily a good thing. Okay. And I think this is where some of the conflict is arising in terms of what people logically now know to be true, available to them, the opportunities now available to women versus what you have been taught is mandatory, is morally right, is going to protect and save you and, enable you to be chosen and selected by a man in order for you to belong with other women. Just this morning, I was doing some work and I had a TikTok live on in the background, and there was conversation whereby there were women on a panel, some of whom were unable, okay, to acknowledge the fact that some women are not functioning as full adults financially in their lives, okay? And a lot of the talking points hark back to a yesteryear when women had no choice. Now, one of the things I want to say from the outset, because I think it's really important, is there are still places in the world right now where women have no other choice, okay, but to marry. Okay, young girls and women, where marriage is the survival strategy. It is the survival option. So when I'm having these conversations, I'm not speaking to those very real circumstances and systemic realities for women who are living in places like that around the world. And I am fully aware that it is indeed a relative privilege that for women in other places, specifically maybe parts of Europe, the UK, the US, etc., there are other options, okay? Marriage isn't the only route down which a woman has to go in order to make sure she's got food and shelter, okay? So that's just let's just start there, okay? Because so often in my comments, people will bring that up and it's an obvious truth. So we just need to acknowledge that at the outset. Right, where to start with this, okay? One of my core beliefs that I stand by, that I understood very clearly as a child, is that money does not come from men. Okay. And we obviously have to acknowledge the fact that financial systems, okay, systemically, when it comes to money, women were excluded. okay, from those systems. You could not have your own bank account, get a loan in your name, sign a lease on an apartment in many places in the world. The US and the UK only made that possible in the 1970s. And so we are literally in the first episode of a brand new season when it comes to women and money, independent, separate from men. Okay? Before the 70s, you would very much need a father, a brother, some male in your life, okay, to co-sign or sign, quite frankly, for something. And that has systemically impacted the way women view money, interact with money, the way women manage money on a nervous system level. Because I think quite often people forget it's not simply about suddenly being able to or being given the right to do something. Like collectively as women, we are in the first episode of a brand new season of being able to have direct access to money on our own terms and being regarded essentially as legal entities in our own right who can access and manage and spend and have and make money. Okay. And so we have to acknowledge that systemic and historical reality and that foundation. We're not starting at the same point that systemically men are starting when it comes to money. And therefore, it does make sense, okay, that of course, one of the main things that women typically, historically have been taught to be true, taught to be life-saving, taught to be the way things should be done, the status quo is that you would look for a male partner. And of course, a lot of these conversations are definitely within the heterosexual, heteronormative context, okay? Although, of course, these attitudes about money still emerge in same-sex relationships because patriarchy and misogyny impacts you regardless of your sexual orientation. But women were taught, okay, that money comes through men. Survival, okay, resources, access that money enables comes through men. You would need to partner with a man. You'd leave the home of your father and you would move to a husbandly owner. Okay, and it's through that your financial future would be secured, that you would experience financial stability. So dependence on men for money was baked into the system. There were no other options or choices. And of course, that has happened from generation to generation and to generation. Now, again, okay, I always ask people to use their critical thinking. It is true. Working class women, women of color, specifically black women, have always worked. Okay, so this whole kind of fantasy around a very short-lived reality, I don't know, 40s, 50s, 60s of the housewife, that is not universal as an experience. Okay, there are women who have always worked, who have always contributed significantly financially to their households. And without their salary, without the money that they brought into that home, that household would not be ticking along. We do have to indeed acknowledge that. Okay, right. But here's the thing, financial dependency between men and women is not just an economic arrangement. It is an invisible contract in itself. And like all invisible contracts, it reshapes the persons who are living inside it. So when your survival, when your comfort becomes attached to a man's financial provision, it changes how you see yourself as a woman and what you're capable of. Okay, it becomes embedded in your identity and what you perceive your capabilities to be. And then there's all sorts of things around safety and comfort and security around that. And these things affect you on a nervous system level. It's not just academic. It's not intellectual in the mind only. Remember, our body is always looking to be safe, to feel safe, to belong, to be accepted. And so I totally understand why for a lot of women, when I talk about the fact that money does not come from or through men, it is on a nervous system level disruptive. It pierces everything you've been taught, everything you believe, everything your body believes is safe, believes will keep you alive. Okay? I mean, I could wax lyrical on this because the truth of the matter is, it is not the man that provides you with financial stability. It is the law. Okay, a lot of the protections that women are hankering after, understandably, from generation to generation, right? We're not crazy. This came from somewhere and was reinforced and incentivized and rewarded as a way of living for women. So, of course, we are trying to stay alive on a very biological level, okay? And so the point I'm making here is that the truth of the matter is that you are trying to survive, okay? But it is the law that provides these protections. It isn't the specific man that you're with, okay? Even when I hear women talking about entering into a marriage, for example, marriage is a legal container. It is a legal structure that provides certain structural advantages, benefits, and privileges for those in the marriage. And that includes women. Again, historically, this was needed. This was needed, but you need to understand that it is structural, okay? And then it's layered in with invisible contracts that often on a nervous system level, many women feel unsafe at the thought, at the prospect of not relying or depending upon a man for money. Even, funny enough, when they don't need to. So even when they make their own money, even when they are self-sufficient financially, even if they make more money than their partner, there is still something deep within it. And it's not just social norms. It's deeper than that. It's not just because they're self-conscious of how their friends might, what their friends might think if they find out that they are, the breadwinner in their home, that they make more money than their male partner. On a nervous system level, women often feel like it doesn't feel right, but that is because of these invisible contracts, okay? It's because of these invisible contracts that sit in the nervous system. Because remember, your nervous system is the safety and threat system in your body. It has classified certain experiences, etc., as either safe or not. And it's just trying to keep you alive. And that gets reinforced externally by conditioning and programming. Like I say, these invisible contracts are reinforced and they are rewarded. So when you as a woman see other women say, well, because I'm so feminine, because I positioned myself, so well, right? I've done all of these femininity, beauty maxing, and that's why I was chosen and selected by a provider man. Okay, I went to these places. I dressed like this. I became more soft. Okay, I don't argue back. I'm agreeable. I'm cooperative. All of those things. You witness other women saying, this is what they're doing to get this provider man. Okay, so that they can depend on a man financially, because that's the right natural way of things, right? That is the feminine role, to receive, when really it's dependency. That's what it is, okay? The other thing about these invisible contracts, because they're so strong, not only does it impact the way women see themselves and what they're capable of, it also impacts the decisions that they make and what they would tolerate. This is one of the reasons why, of course, when we look at women from yesteryears, okay, and this is why I find it hilarious, especially when I hear men, talk about their grandmothers and their great-grandmothers. There was one particular man, one of his videos came up and he talked about the fact there were 5 generations of married couples in his family and they're all happy. And I thought, well, how on earth can you speak for the women 5 generations ago? Because at least 3 of those 5 generations couldn't have their own bank account. One of them may even have been a child. Some of them might even have been slaves. So what are you talking about happiness? Right? You can't account for the happiness of women hundreds of years ago. It's ridiculous, okay? And so it impacts what women are willing to tolerate when they are dependent on a man, an adult man. And I think this is really important. Yes, it's true that in some cultures in previous years, these are young people getting married. So they only got each other, okay? But actually, if you're an adult woman, dependency on an adult man for finances, it's not it, okay? So this matters, is the bottom line. It does matter. And, recently I did another video that I did, and, yet another woman online gave up her entire career, moved country, went to live in a different country with a man because she was in love. did not work for about 5 years, had 2 children. And one day he gets up and says he doesn't want this anymore. She just about had enough money to get a flight back to the UK. And now she's online sharing her story in this kind of 15-part series to make money off of her TikTok presence, doing a GoFundMe. Adult women should function like adults financially. It's really important, okay? And so, yeah, I can't say this enough, really and truly, right? So yes, we can acknowledge that women have been excluded from financial systems, okay? Property rights, banking, credit, inheritance. You see, before, in those days, inheritance would bypass the woman. It went to the man. If you've ever watched Downton Abbey, okay, you remember there was a series whereby, it was funny because it used to come up quite often, okay, that the main matriarch and patriarch of that show, the wealth came through her. But of course, it went to her husband to manage. Okay. And on top of that, there was in one of the later series, the main matriarch, her brother was managing part of their estate. And what did he do? He was defrauded. He was defrauded by another gentleman. He had kind of basically spent the money and had to come from the US to the UK to tell her that the money had gone. Okay. Inheritance. All of these things are structural things that women were excluded from. Okay. So that's that. Now, let's also talk about what this actually does to a woman on the inside. I alluded to some of this earlier, but can you afford to leave if you need to leave? Can you afford to disagree? Can you afford to be honest? Because when your survival becomes attached to compliance and obedience, when you are a grown adult, that's a different kettle of fish, okay? Because compliance is not choice. Okay, and a lot of women have been kind of conditioned into believing that you need to have the desire to comply, that it's common sense, that it's logic. When in actual fact, the reality is you can't leave. You can't leave for any reason, really, because you don't have your own financial foundation. You don't have your own financial foundation. And so what ends up happening is that women will soften their opinions, soften their ambition. You edit your personality because actually financial stability overall is safer for you. It feels safer because you can't afford to leave. You can't afford to have your own opinion, really, because this individual, this adult individual, is paying for food and shelter. These are real observations and real stories. There isn't a day that doesn't go by, particularly on TikTok, where a woman comes on and talks about financial difficulty, and that being the reason why she cannot leave a relationship, that being the reason why it took her so long to leave the relationship. Okay? There's a psychological weight that you hold when you know that your comfort, so because remember, survival is lower than comfort. When you know that your survival and comfort depends on somebody else's goodwill. And this is the other point I want to bring up here. And you know, because I did another video and that one had nearly 1 million views, but very split in the comments. The fact of the matter is, when you are relying on another adult, when you are an adult, right, to provide for you financially, you are literally dependent upon their goodwill. And when it comes to male and female dynamics, you are dependent upon the affection, the attention, and I'm going to use the word existing attention and affection of that man. Because when that attention and affection declines, downgrades, dissipates, or disappears, so does the same level of commitment he might have shown before to providing financially for you. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, I've got kids with him, so he should continue to provide and he should enjoy doing it. All too many examples, okay? There's research, there's statistics, there's evidence, there's anecdotal stories that tell us that when, this is human beings, this is human nature, when affection and attention is distracted, disappears, so does the same level of commitment. And this takes me back to the point I brought up earlier. It is the law that provides certain protections. Because the truth of the matter is, when somebody no longer wants to be with you, when they don't want to engage with you in a particular type of way anymore, They don't feel an onus or an obligation. We see plenty of people walk away from providing for their own children, their own blood and DNA. And they feel even less onus towards somebody they're no longer in love with, somebody they don't respect anymore, someone they don't trust anymore, someone they don't like anymore. Okay? And having a life insurance policy, I can't tell you, since moving to the US, the amount of people who say, well, we've got a life insurance policy. So you're waiting for somebody to pass away to get some money. This does not make any sense. Okay, you are literally relying on somebody's goodwill. So when it comes to your dignity as an adult, this is not a good look. And we're not in the 1940s and 50s. It's 2026. It is 2026. Okay, showing up in your own life psychologically and financially like a fully functioning adult is a basic, it's a standard. I honestly, I don't understand sometimes how there are women in my comments all the time arguing otherwise. We need to be very clear here about it is an important thing. It's not really a nice to have, it's a non-negotiable at this point. It's 2026. Having your own means of generating your own income is key. Depending on a man for money is not wise. It's not sustainable. And you know what? It's not loving to yourself, and it's not loving to your children. Women need to go beyond thinking, well, I chose this man that I'm procreating with, so I made a good financial choice. No. It doesn't end there. Because again, anything could happen. Anything unexpected could happen. And then you are unable to provide for your own children, who you also have a responsibility to. It's not just him. You also have the responsibility to the children that you are bringing into this world. So here are some of the specific invisible contracts we need to be aware of, okay? So the contract that says a woman who expects financial provision is feminine, and a woman who builds her own is a threat. This is a big one. You see, I always try to be fair. I think it's important to think about the broader issues at play here, because it's all well and good saying to women, you should be self-sufficient financially as an adult. But the reality is there is definitely an invisible contract that all people have been taught, this is men and women, that actually the feminine, the divine feminine, is a receiver. Soft life, switch your brain off, all of that kind of thing. That's feminine, and that's natural design. You're at your highest, your deepest essence when all you do is receive. So it's not for you to go out there into the capitalist world. You shouldn't be going out there to slog it out. That's not how women's systems are made. I love that one. The way women are biologically set up, we're unable to work. Now, let me say this at this point. No one is saying that you should go and burn yourself out in any job, quite frankly. But regardless of gender, human beings have a natural desire to be productive, to create, to explore, to learn, to give, to add value. And there are a myriad of ways of doing that. You do not have to go and slug it out. And again, critical thinking. I am not talking about women who currently live in rural areas, who are living below the poverty line in places in the world whereby the work that they're doing is hard physical labor. Okay, but what I am saying is we talk in extremes too much, and some of this is a smokescreen, I believe. Okay? Regardless of gender, we must be productive. Regardless of gender. So you can choose what you want to do to make money. It's completely up to you. Completely up to you. Okay? The point of the matter is it is not masculine, okay, to generate your own income. Money is energy. It's a renewable resource. It doesn't have an agenda. It doesn't have any isms. It's not sexist. It's not racist. It's not ableist. Financial systems, so when we talked about systems of power, absolutely. Systems of power, yes. But I'm talking about money itself as a resource. It does not have an agenda. So you as a woman, it is not masculine or against divine order and nature and design for you to simply be able to generate your own income. And there are a myriad of ways of doing that. And so because a lot of women fundamentally believe that it is more feminine to not make your own money, and of course society and the most misogynistic of men have told you that that means that you will not be selected, you will not be chosen, you will not be desired. Now we can talk in another video about what these people are getting chosen for. But I understand that, again, these invisible contracts are alive and well, because actually, if you want to be regarded as feminine, if you yourself subscribe to certain narrow perceptions and lens of femininity, then of course, this is going to be a challenging one for you. Because you don't want to be undesirable. You want to be chosen. And so you want to make it easier for the masculine, for this provider man to choose you. And so therefore, it would be threatening, it would be intimidating, it would be against divine nature for you to have your own financial foundation. I can't tell you, when I was growing up, especially in the religion I grew up in, the amount of women who said they're not going to buy a property because they'll wait for their husband. Some of them are now in their 50s and 60s. A husband didn't come along. They're not in a financial, they don't have a strong enough financial foundation for the reality of adult singlehood. I saw that when I was growing up and said, it won't be me. I'm getting it all now. My single life is not a waiting room, last resort. It's not that, okay? But of course, that meant that I was regarded in many ways as not feminine enough. I love cars. I bought a 4x4 one year, and I remember I was dropping something off to an elder and his family, and he looked out the window at the car and he said, "Why do you have that car? You don't have a family, you're single." I said, "Am I meant to be on a scooter because I'm single?" Right? He was like, "Well, what is a husband? What do you mean, what is a husband going to do? I'm an adult. A vehicle is pretty basic and standard." That's not me overstepping the mark, coming away from natural design, right? So that is an invisible contract that is alive and well, where women are consistently positioned to be feminine. Okay, the contract that says that asking men for money is a dating strategy rather than a dependency pattern. Okay, so I'm sorry, there's all of these internet pimps. Some of them are glamorous women, women that you admire and respect, who say that they have found a provider man. And you're being taught this as a dating strategy, when in actual fact, what it does is it leads to dependency, unhealthy financial dependency. And in the process, a lot of the time, okay, women, and particularly young women who don't have life experience, because I want to know who they're asking money from. Because a 22-year-old woman can't be asking money from a 22-year-old boy. Neither of them have money. So that means she's asking money from a grown man, a man who knows the game. And that means that 9 times out of 10, because I cannot be convinced by a lot of these messages and DMs and the comments that from every woman knows how to play this game without being and come off unscathed every time. I don't believe so. Yeah, the amount of women who say that they do nothing, nada, zilch, and men just cash out their money, that is a minority. And even then, when I go and look on their profiles, there's a lot of a certain type of content on their profile. So in a way, that's a window, that's a shop window anyway. So you might not have had to sit on the phone for hours or go out on a date with him, but there is still some kind of exchange of energy. Okay? And so actually, okay, a lot of the time, this is dependency. It's another dependency pattern. It's not merely just a dating strategy, because the expectation for a man to provide continues beyond if you do go into an actual marriage, for example. A contract that says that financial self-sufficiency in women is optional. This is one that I'm still astounded at, quite frankly. The amount of women who insist in my comments that it is optional. Women don't need to have their own money because that's a man's role. You're an adult. I don't get it. It's 2026. It's not the 1950s where you could not work and you were excluded from a financial system. I don't understand the lack of willingness to have your own money. And some of you might be kind of listening and or watching this and thinking, well, no, that's not me. I don't know women. There are lots of women who feel this way. The amount of comments I saw the other day on a video I did on this topic, and one woman said, I don't need to even think about what interest rates are. That will be something my husband does in the future. Okay. Being being an adult financially is not something you aspire to. It's not optional. It's foundational. That's what it is. Also, the other contract is that a woman's financial vulnerability is attractive to the right man rather than dangerous. Yeah? Some women, and look, there are men who say this, misogynistic men, okay, who say, actually, I like it when a woman doesn't have her own money. I feel like she is more submissive. She's letting me be the leader when she doesn't have her own money, when all the money is pulled into one bank account, when she doesn't have a boss that she has to submit to. Why should she be submitting to somebody else outside of the home when she could be submitting to me? These are actual things in my comments. It's not made up. Not made up at all. Okay? There's a certain piece here around this kind of financial vulnerability makes you more desirable to the provider masculine. So, of course, women want to be desirable. They want to be chosen. Women who desire relationships with men, this is still something that they want. Okay? The contract that says a woman who can survive alone does not need love. Okay? She is incompatible with a relationship with the provider masculine. I mean, we could talk about this nonsense around provider men another time. Right? These are the type of invisible contracts that are very much at play on a nervous system level. Okay? It's not just conditioning and programming. That's the external. But inside the body, most women don't feel safe unless they obey these types of invisible contracts. So even if cognitively, logically in the mind, you think, actually, obviously I'd have my own job. Obviously I want to have my own money. Obviously, I want to get an education. There are going to be parts of you internally. And that's what I observe often when I see a lot of, pushback in my comments, and people go as far to DM me and email me their disgust at the fact that I'm talking about the fact that I don't think women should ask men for money at all. I don't think that should be a standard, particularly before and unless you're not going into a marriage. Now, and this is the other thing I'll say lastly as we wrap up here, because again, critical thinking. If you are considering getting married, if you are thinking of forming a household with another adult, the common sense thing to do, okay, because marriage is a legal structure, of course, you need to assess each other's economic viability in alignment with your desired lifestyle and quality of life. Duh, you've got to assess that. So you will need to have very transparent, open conversations about money and who's making it, how you're sharing it, how it's being spent, all of the things. So I'm not saying money does not matter at all. What I'm saying is a lot of the time women really, are being encouraged to say, send me $200, send me £100, pay for my holiday. And this is rampant, especially in the younger generations. And it is really a bad practice. And like I say, for young women, you are putting yourself in precarious situations because a 21-year-old doesn't have that kind of cash on hand, generally speaking. So now we're feeding into power imbalances, age gap dynamics, and exploitation. But no one wants to talk about that. They are just dead set on the fact that you should be able to ask men for money just to go out on a date with you, which is ridiculous. Okay? It's ridiculous. So here's what I'll leave you with in this particular kind of session, as it were. The reality is a woman who can survive and be self-sufficient financially becomes significantly harder to control, contain, and restrict. Okay? And fear of abandonment, punishment, or even financial instability disappears or reduces entirely. When you can take care of your basic, at least your basic needs as a woman, right? You do not have to be in fear of consequences when you decide that you want to change your mind, you need to step away, or something happens. You're able to survive. And this isn't about rejecting partnership. I really shouldn't have to say this, but unfortunately I do, right? It's not about rejecting partnership or hating men. So unnecessary, okay? It's about what both adults, two adults, can bring to any household, any relationship, when you're not coming from a position of financial desperation or dependency. And I genuinely believe the most powerful thing a single woman can do right now is build income, generate your own income, become well resourced, create infrastructure in your life that belongs to you. It literally changes the way your nervous system functions. Okay. A lot of the time, you're not tired. You're not. You are under-resourced. And money is a tool that will enable you to introduce more infrastructure into your life. Now, money doesn't make you morally superior, okay? But one thing that is for sure is that dependency on men for money, it creates a vulnerability that can lead to really, really quite challenging experiences for women. And we see this over and over and over again. Okay, so that's what I wanted to share in this session, essentially. So here's the thing. We covered this in detail in week 4 of the Unpunishable Woman Intensive, which begins in July. So excited. This is the 3rd run of the intensive where single women all over the world come together and we really identify the invisible contracts, okay, that prevent you from becoming really unpunishable in your life, okay? And we focus in week 4 in particular on wealth, on work and freedom, okay? So that you do not have to live a life that is literally just running on the bare bones, where you have more choice. You're not just simply surviving in your life. So the cohort is now open for you to join. Check out the link and do join us. And until next time, stay unpunishable.